Chief Financial Report.
Okay. All right, good evening. I would like to highlight the March 2018 financials. If we look at Board Book page 10, I'd like to go over the monthly financial report. This represents 75% of our fiscal year. Total monthly revenue for the month of March was $9.4 million. Out of that $9.4 million, real estate taxes accounted for roughly $8.6 million. General state aid was $160,000, and interest income was distributed in March. That accounted for $186,000. On the expenditure side, total monthly expenditures for the month of March was $2.4 million. Out of the $2.4 million, salary and benefits was $1.5 million. Capital projects, we did make final payment on the 2015 project of roughly $400,000. And out-of-district tuition for the month of March was $145,000. Our operating fund balances at the end of March is $19.6 million, but I want to make sure that everyone realizes that $3 million of it is restricted for capital improvement and land acquisition. Moving on to the financial statements, ending the 9 months. If we look at Board Book page 11, this shows our beginning fund balance as of July 1, plus our revenue minus our expenditures. And in the ending balance column, that shows the fund balances for all funds as of the end of March. If we move on to Board Book page 12 and focus on the revenue side, if we look at the education fund, the operation fund, and the transportation fund, and look to the far right to see where we're at with the percentage-wise, I am expecting additional property taxes to come in this next quarter. So I'm anticipating that our education revenue will be over 100%. If we go to the operations and maintenance, we're sitting at 93%. We should get an additional corporate property replacement tax payment from the state coming in the next quarter, which should bring it very close to 100% of budget. And under transportation, I'm expecting one more transportation payment to come in from the state, which will bring it very close to 100% or over 100%.
Working cash is over because of the $3 million in working cash, correct?
With the issuance of the bond.
So is that why it looks like it's 111 over?
Yes.
Okay.
If we move to Board Book page 13 and look at the expenditure side, Ed Fund, 75% of budget. That's very good. It's tracking right at the 75%. Barring any major expenditures that come up, it should come in right at budget or better. Same thing goes for operation and maintenance. Hopefully we won't have any major repairs or something that needs to be replaced within the next quarter, so it should come in right at budget. Our transportation fund, depending on if our athletic teams or clubs in this final quarter here qualify for state, we could see some fluctuation in the costs there. And then ultimately we do have some high transportation costs in special ed, so we got to keep track of that. But it should come in, barring what we have, right at what's at budget.
And the extra 120 in the working cash is to when we did the shift from life safety to working cash to cover capital expenses?
Where are you at here?
On expenditures, last working cash fund 70, 425 was the budget, 541.
Yes, that was the additional $70,000, and then there was a bond issuance cost that was in it to account for those money. There was the $70,000 made in this month, or last month's, to cover the last payment. So that's where it's reflected.
Okay.
Moving on to the revenue expense report. There were questions submitted. In Board Book, it was page I believe, 6 and 7.
8 and 9 is where Mary Ann put them in, so she put them in before the report.
Okay.
Or 7 and 8, I'm sorry.
7 and 8.
7 and 8.
Okay. Just to run through these quickly, all the prior year and current year taxes that are out there do look a little off. You'll see 108% and roughly 95%. 108 in the prior year and 95% in the current year in all the levies that we have out there. I just want to remind everybody that we did have taxes that came in from FY17 that came in and were distributed in FY18 in July. That accounted for roughly, I would say, around 300,000. I am anticipating more taxes to come in, so you may see an increase in the current year levy line, hopefully push closer to 100%, but that's all dependent on tax distributions released from the Cook County.
What are we budgeted at?
It's budgeted at 98.5%.
Okay. So every 1% is roughly $100,000?
That is correct.
So we're hoping at the minimum it's 3.5% before the end of the year, correct?
That is correct in the last quarter. If you look on, there was a question about the interest on it. I did put in the CFO report a treasurer's, from the Township Treasurer report showing our interest earned on investment. So there will be some accounts that look dramatically over in all funds. I basically budgeted on a 3-year historical within the pool that the treasurer had, and this year they increased the amount that was pooled, and there were some other factors that I'll discuss later in the CFO report that impacted the increase in the interest earned. Registration fees in March, they do look over budget on that. We did have a very good month of collecting fees because this was prior to prom, which really helped out. However, these fees still need to be distributed into the correct student fee accounts. Special education, private facility, and special ed room and board. The district received payments from FY17 and FY18 under the Tech Enhancing Education Grant. This is the CTEI and Perkins. FY17 grant money was received in FY18, which is why it's showing over budget. Corporate property replacement tax is under budget. I am expecting the state to release one final payment on that. Hopefully it's around $130,000. However, I'm not sure if the state's going to actually distribute it. It is very unpredictable with that. On the expenditure side of the revenue expense, there was a question in regards to capital outlay and wellness. It previously explained at the February board meeting, the department purchased new equipment for the wellness center using student fees to cover the cost. To accurately account for the cost of the capital over $1,000, it has to be itemized under capital, and money was available in the student supply account.
So we'll have a deposit into a revenue side to offset that expense, but
Yes,
it looks,
the student fees has a revenue side, and then we also have the expense side.
okay.
Do you have a list of all these special funds you have that in our mind we use for particular purposes? We talked about this with the, the federal, what are the two, Title I and Title II.
Title I, Title II.
How you decide what you're going to do with the revenue there. And, this comes up, well, we use this fee to use this. I mean, I think you should let the board know all these kind of special set-aside ideas you have, what you use funds for.
Okay.
So Kristen, when you present the board the fees list, I think that happened a month or two ago. The final student fees, course fees.
Course fees go in the fall, so those were in October. They were presented it to the board.
Okay, so I would check like under the PE course fee if there, so it shows that a portion of that fee is being assigned to help replace, equipment and replacement cycle for fitness rooms and.
Our past practice for fees has been to provide a rationale for any fee that's increased or decreased, but we can add the detail for the other fees as well for next year.
Just so I think that would answer some of these questions.
Right.
Keep going, Scott, you're on the, they can read the answers to you. Is there any specific ones you want to highlight in the rest of the expenditures?
Yeah, the school safety liaison, we did pay a portion of the salary out of a grant, the Title IV grant. And it was submitted for reimbursement. That should be coming in. And some of the hard stuff to budget for is when you have to amend the grants and you have the original amendment, and then the next thing you know, you're light in one line item. So you're always kind of jockeying around with the amounts. So sometimes there will be a difference between what the original budget was compared to the expenditure. Just a reminder to the board is all these grants, though, are reimbursable. So we have to spend first and then put in for reimbursement. The main thing with the grants is you don't want to leave any money on the table.
If you don't use it,
Then
you lose it, right?
That is correct.
Mary Ann, roll it up so I can read the last line, would you?
I would like to highlight the telephone one. This was a budget oversight. There was an increase in the internet charge and an alarm line charge. It has been addressed by using the phone consultant and getting the new pricing of what the internet is and factored it all in. And also our new phone system will help with that for our FY19 budget.
And the oversight was just we didn't update the numbers as we continue to increase the bandwidth, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so that will be addressed in the FY19 budget?
Yes.
And field trips, are we taking more field trips than usual this year? Is that why the count looks like it's over?
We have taken quite a few field trips, but we also have a lot of contests that the kids are attending with it. As they're qualifying for various things throughout the course of the school day, they're going and attending and competing. And that's one of the reasons that it is a little bit over budget on that.
Are we 6,000 over a $15,000 budget line item?
It says 3,000.
3,000.
I know what it says, but if you look at the line, it says the unexpended is a minus 6,000, which includes an encumbrance of 3,000. And the budget was 15,000.
Mhm.
So we're
It is
40%
over.
over budget.
Yes.
So did you under budget this, or did you, is that something we need to look at a 3-year historical? Do you need
It's
to meet with
probably-
Kristen and her staff to figure out how
It's
many field
probably
trips?
under budgeted. I will work through Kristen and her staff to determine.
I asked the question for a different reason. When I asked, why are we over? At some point, now we think we're going to have a surplus, and we thought we were going to have a deficit, right? Appears we probably will have a surplus now, but at some point, if the board approved a budget of 15,000 based on what the administrator presented, at some point you might have to say no. We don't have money for that. And instead of just saying, with 15,000 we made a mistake, now we're going to spend an extra 6,000, and the year's not over.
No, I
I assume
understand,
this
but I
is
also
just
don't
a
want to
waiver.
take away any opportunity for students to gain educational experience on a field trip or a competition. I think that's a huge piece, and I understand the thought process behind here's what was budgeted, and you got to pay closer attention to it. But if something comes up, I think it's very valuable that they go on these trips.
I agree. You would tell a kid no if they qualify for something that oh, sorry, we can't afford to send you?
I'm sure there's hundreds of field trips available that we could send people on that we didn't this year, aren't there? We don't send them on everything that's available, do we?
That it goes through a whole process of getting approved.
Yeah, but I'm saying, you pick and choose already to some extent, don't you?
Kristen, does the building administration deny field trips?
We deny a field trip typically only if there's not a connection to the curriculum, which typically they wouldn't request it if there wasn't a benefit for being out of the classroom. And then sometimes we have blackout dates. So on AP testing or on SAT testing, we have certain times of the year where we feel it's important for students to come, but those are the blackout date would be the only reason, and we do make exceptions for those as well, depending on the field trip.
So I think what needs to happen is the building administration work a little closer with Scott on the budgeting for next year.
Well, and families contribute to field trips, so I don't think we're getting spend thrifty with field trips, because when the students go somewhere, the kids are buying their tickets. I think we may have gone to state or won some athletic competitions we just didn't anticipate
There's a
this year.
separate budget for that.
I think we need to do some more planning and preparing when we do the budget.
Well, let me answer the question I was asked by two. Yes, as we go through a period in the future where we are predicting to have deficit spending, at some point, we would have to, say no, we don't have the money for it. Unless you're going to give up something else in exchange, or you're going to, again, one of the problems with this way this data is laid out, which hopefully you can fix with the new system you're going to get, is we don't track the net effect if it's an expense item and there's a revenue item for the same thing. So I can't tell from here. I presume we don't collect the exact amount that we're, whatever the cost of the transportation for a field trip. We don't make our students pay for them all the time, do we? Or the whole cost?
For transportation?
Yeah.
No.
I didn't think so. And we can't tell from here. But yes, we started this year predicting a deficit, and that's why I keep asking questions. It seems like there's an improvement, and we're not going to have a deficit. But based on the numbers we have, we expect to have a deficit next year, and the year after, and the year after that. And part of what you have to manage is say, yes, here's what you asked for, here's what you budgeted. If you're going to spend more money in that line item, you have to take it away from somewhere else. You can't just say, the whole budget to a certain extent is for the benefit of the students. So, why is a field trip transportation item more important than some other item in the budget?
Well, Tim, I think this is also a board discussion too, just like we have administration come to us and ask, we'd like to run a class with less than 20 students. I don't think one board member can tell administration, you gotta say no. I think we, as a board, might instruct administration to come to us and say, well, here's some field trips that we think are valuable that will go over budget. Would you approve them? I don't think we want to send that message that we're going to tell Scott to start saying no to these trips or these competitions right now.
I think before we get it, making it a board issue, not a board issue, I think there's some work that can be done between the CFO and the administration to lay some things out a little better, so that when Scott, we talked a little bit today, when he presents his financial officer's report, he could alert the board ahead of time to say, hey, we're getting close to being out of field trip money.
Yeah.
And I know there's still these field trips in the hopper. So Scott's got to do a little more work on his side and his reporting and on the budgeting and working with the administration so that they have an understanding what their budget is. So I don't think we have to say no to anything right now.
No, I'm not suggesting that.
And so, but you're right, it would have been helpful to bring to the board, if Scott was bringing to the board, hey, we're at budget or at the end of budget, and I still wanted to approve these 5 field trips. At least the board's aware.
Right.
And at that point, if the board wants to make a motion to vote or not vote, or to proceed as usual, then we can. So
I think my point is really not, it just happens to be this line item. It could have been some other line item. I was looking at the ones that were over budget. And my point is, when the administration, and again, nobody's perfect on a budget, and there's a whole pupil transportation, there's a ton of line items on it. So, you could say like the other one, maybe a different line item, you're going to spend less. I can't tell from here. But my concern is, that we have to start thinking about. We should either stick with the budget, or if we're gonna have to spend over on this line item, what line item are we gonna not spend on, so that we're properly managing our funds if we are gonna be deficit spending? That, again, no, I'd like to see kids go on field trips, but I like to see a lot of the other things that are going on in the budget too, right?
Do we look at these departmentally?
In terms of.
Because this is not in a departmental budget,
No, it's general.
it's general.
We used,
And so can like one department be spending $7,000, another one spending 0, another one spending 0, another one spending 8? And if it's broken up by departmental, they're given a certain amount of monies based off historical and said, this is
Your piece of the pie.
your piece of the pie.
we used to do it that way. We ran into more issues that way. And so it was put into one transportation account for field trips. Every year we do look at the end of the year, we do a field trip analysis of, here are the different departments, the number of field trips they went on, and the cost associated with
But
that.
how are we budgeting now, the dollars for the field trips? We just said, okay, historically, we spent $15,000, we're gonna spend $15,000 again, and so therefore, you don't have anyone accountable by department. And so the department will come, keep asking and asking until we say no. All I'm suggesting is, as opposed to maybe doing it so with some sense of departmental and still having the flexibility of going over. I'm not saying shut them down, but you also can get a picture of.
Well, as it makes sense, Gary, is the math department going to take field trips?
Yeah?
I was just going to say that.
Assume they
Some
do.
departments, it may be more.
History and English probably take more than.
Right.
Right.
Right, well,
So
then
it's
if
not
that's
gonna
the
be equal
case,
across
that's the
the board.
case, that's
Right.
fine, they're gonna take it, but,
Right.
but if the department came and said, I'm gonna spend 15,000 in field trips, and now they're coming and asking for 25,
I think
think-
Scott and Kristen can figure this out.
right,
And I think there needs to be a little more in-depth look at before we do the budget, when we do these monthly reports. Right?
That's helpful, thank you.
Okay.
I think that was all of them,
Yeah,
right, Scott?
Yep.
Yes, on the revenue expense. Moving on, you will see the month-ending summary of the activity accounts. 2 accounts were in the negative, Illinois Virtual School and Alumni Achievement account. Hopefully, with the fees collected in March and April here, that'll take care of the virtual school. The Alumni Achievement one, we're working on trying to get that down to 0. Moving on, after the student activity account, you have a third quarter building rental paid invoice report. For the third quarter, the district had $12,335 of profit for using the facility. If you look at year-to-date, the net profit year-to-date on the pie chart right after the monthly one, $36,838.
I want to change the word profit to surplus. Government agencies can't make a profit.
Okay. Alright. Just showing the net position on that.
I understand.
And then the last report is a summary from the Township Treasurer on the interest earned. Couple of the things that increased it was our pool was higher than what the historical was, and the Fed rate increased, causing the earnings to be higher than what they've been the past couple years.
And so the district benefited by how much, Scott?
Roughly 68,000 more than what was budgeted out there.
What's the period that we're getting the interest payment for? I
It's
mean, I
from-
looked at the report, but.
It's from March 2017 through February
So that's.
18.
And then they hold the interest for the.
And then they
we only
put
get
it-
paid once a year?
Yes. And then they distribute it in March.
Anything else, Scott? Any other questions submitted?
No other questions were submitted.
All right, it's a chance for visitors to make comments. Look out there, does anyone, visitors want to make any comments? All right, we'll move on then. I will not read the long dissertation.